And that leads us to our next heresy that's very common, which is docetism. And so, Dr. Blackwell, do you want to explain what that is?
Yeah, sure. This predates Apollinarianism, so it takes us a step closer to the New Testament, or between the early church history. And so I know we'll talk about Gnosticism here in just a second, but it builds off this idea that the spiritual and the physical worlds don't really fit together well. And so if God is if one is, not only that they not fit together well, that one ultimately is good and one is ultimately bad. So this dualism. And of course, God then is going to be on the good side and not the material side. So the good side then is the spiritual. And so, if we're going to talk about docetism, relates specifically to the way people viewed Christ. Was he really human when he came incarnate? And docetism says no, he's not really human. He only seemed to be human, and this is where we get the word docetism from. It's from the Greek word that means to seem. And so there are a couple of different versions of this that Irenaeus, he's writing in the 170s AD, so a couple of generations after the New Testament. He says that some early Christians that said he only seemed to have any physical body, so he was more like a ghost. He was just a spiritual being that had this appearance, but not really physically there. And then others said that actually the human man Jesus was there, and the spiritual Christ came at his baptism and inhabited him. So in a way that we might think of demonic oppression in a negative fashion, that this was a positive thing, that the spiritual Christ came and motivated him. Sometimes we use the language of the Holy Spirit driving us and leading us. That would be the way that they talked about the Christ coming and inhabiting the man Jesus. And then before the cross happened, this Christ left him, and just the human man suffered, because physical suffering is not what God would be about. And so the Christ would leave. But the whole idea here was that these two aspects of reality just don't work together, right? And so the incarnation of the divinity and humanity that we see in Apollinarianism, Apollinarius said he had a real body, just not a full human intellect, right? And so it's still, they were wrapped around one another, whereas the Docetists said, look, you can't even wrap them around one another. They're just two opposite things. And so it speaks to this issue of, did God create a good world? Is this physical world something deficient by nature, or is it something that sin has corrupted? And of course, if you have a good theology that brings together creation and the hope of new creation, that this physical world we redeemed, that Christ then too came in fully and participated in this, and not was corrupted by it, but actually healed it. And so some of the language that comes around later is that if there's any aspect of humanity he didn't take on, then that aspect of humanity wasn't healed. And so this is why him just having a physical body didn't, our minds need great healing, and so for Christ to take on both the rational soul and a body is essential for our understanding of the incarnation. Not just because it's a doctrinal piece, but it speaks to how we're transformed, but also to this larger idea that the spiritual and the physical are not in opposition to one another. And actually, in actuality, and God's purpose in creation to new creation, it's when they work best together, when they're in harmony. And so we can encounter God in authentic ways in our physical reality.
That's an awesome explanation, and that's really what as Isaiah 53, right? It covers every single aspect of ourselves, physical, emotional, spiritual, that Jesus redeemed. And I think that that it's hard. I don't know why, but I think a lot of times, like at least with modern Christians, we have a heretical understanding of Jesus. We think he was something other than us, and we don't understand that he was fully us, totally. And so that's what can give us hope about our situation entirely. But when I was interviewing Donald Williams, he said he has a section in his book on, I guess, on pietism, and in it, and I had never read this before, but he said that the understanding during the New Testament time of heart was about the whole self. It wasn't, we seem to think of it as like our feelings, our emotions, but it's not. It was like everything, all that we are, everything that we are, this whole integration. And we seem to have a separation of that now. But